my second language. So many years ago, I lived in Sweden, in Stockholm, or Sweden?
Suecia.
Suecia.
In Suecia.
Stockholm. And the Swedish companies, well, first of all, I want to just thank Judith and Swing for hosting this event. Before I came here, I thought advertising was finished, but now that I've come here, it's such a beautiful office. My heart is now back and alive.
There's hope.
There's hope, yeah. It's
Okay.
beautiful offices, and thank you for, and also for your invitation today. So, basically, getting back to the book about uprisings, about 20 years ago, I lived and worked in Stockholm, and I worked with Swedish brands in those days. They were just in Sweden and Finland, Norway maybe, but it was a time when advertising was illegal. There was no TV advertising. You could go to jail. You were an outlaw if you did a TV commercial or a radio ad. Brands were built by building like political movements. A brand had a philosophy, a brand had a point of view on the world, and from that period came many famous brands that traveled the world, like IKEA, like H&M, like Diesel, which is Italian but was created in Stockholm, the campaign. And that came from the psychology of creating a philosophy for a brand and not to create advertising, because advertising is too harsh. This is, 1980s. So I grew up in advertising in Stockholm, and I worked on many brands that had that way of working. So from that period, I started to think, this is really a smart way of advertising, building a brand, building a philosophy, point of view, and creating a movement with people. Diesel was like a movement back in the early 90s, So when we started StrawberryFrog in the late 90s, we said we wanted to build brands by creating movements. And the first brand we worked on was the Smart car. It was owned by Hayek, MCC, the Smart? Mm-hmm. And the Smart at the beginning was not a car, it was like a movement to change the way cities were designed. So Hayek's vision was a reinvention of cities. It was a really crazy idea. They wanted to use the rental car companies and the governments and parking companies to change everything and make it a smarter ecosystem of commuting. We were part of, StrawberryFrog was one of a few agencies that worked on the launch. And it was a real movement at the beginning. And then it was bought by Mercedes. And they pushed out Hayek. They made it a small car. But initially the idea was really ahead of its time. And we worked with IKEA in Amsterdam. And we started to build movements. And Onitsuka Tiger, the running shoe company, we launched. In the beginning, there was no Facebook, there was no, we had virals on email. It feels so long ago.
Yes.
You had a film and you attached it to your email and you squeezed, you know, through
10 years.
5 megabytes in the little pipe, you know, and hope people would send it. But it worked. People did. The idea of a philosophy, of a movement, back in those days was really about, I saw working with those brands. And then with social media, the whole idea just really exploded. And I started to write a book about 2 years ago. And just as I started to write this book, the whole world went crazy, and everywhere there was a movement, everywhere. It started in, you know, obviously in Tunisia, but then everywhere. So, you know, I think sometimes you do something, like in this case, writing a book, and the world comes to you. And in this case, the world is really coming around this whole idea of movements. Everybody now is talking about movements. I wrote about it in the Harvard Business Review and in Fast Company and other American magazines, because I'm based in New York. And then I wrote this book. It looks like this. It's the book. Uprising. How to Build a Brand and Change the World by Sparking Cultural Movements. And so, am I speaking okay? Is it not too fast? Perfect. Any questions so far? No? Okay.
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay. So, you know, it's not such a big deal. I think the idea, is a very simple idea, and I'll explain the thinking behind it. And many people may work this way already. I'm just trying to find a way of crystallizing that thought, that way of working. But I think the controversy in this idea is the fact that a company, a capitalist organization, can take social movement and use that to, you know, sell stuff. Some people think that's, you know, crazy controversial, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Because I think it is the only way for countries and for societies to actually drive positive change, is to get companies to do what they do, so to help mobilize people to make the world a little bit better. Because the governments can't do it, the banks can't do it, technology, you know, tried and failed. I think it needs to be ideas that are going to help, you know, save the world. And those ideas are funded by corporations. So I just talk about, you know, these uprisings everywhere. Everyone knows all of these. Do you know the Susan G. Komen thing? You know what that is?
No.
Susan G. Komen is a huge organization in many countries, but especially in the US. And it's women who are fighting breast cancer. It's a huge, huge organization. I think it's one of the biggest, like a religion. It's just huge. Last year, they decided to stop giving grants, money, to Planned Parenthood, which is an organization in America that teaches young girls about sexual education. And when they did that, it created a huge backlash. Backlash is like a small group of women went onto the internet and literally took down this whole organization in like a day. In one day, they just, you know, this multi-$100 million organization, they took it down in one day, and they forced it to go back against what they had made a decision on. It's incredible. And there's many, many examples in America where this has happened. Bank of America, which is the biggest bank in America, they tried to launch a $5 charge on the debit card. And there was 3 women, again, went online and big thing, and forced the bank not to charge $5, €5 for every time you put your debit card, they charge you €5, which, to many people, is a lot of money. So, so you see examples of uprisings that are happening in society. Coney 2012, obviously. Greece, UK. There was a funny movement in Canada where there was a woman that was raped, and the policeman said that she was dressed like a slut. And so this huge movement of women called the slut walk went all over the world. So it's really this period where people are doing uprisings and changing the world. So why is this happening now? What is different than 1968 or 2 years ago? Well, obviously, everybody has a mobile. In Spain, in America, in most of Europe, we've had cell phones for 10 years or more, but now everybody has cell phones. In India, in China, Iran, all of Africa. South Africa has 200% penetration. In South Africa, there's 200% mobile phones. Everybody has Facebook, everybody has Twitter, everybody has these things everywhere. So I think it's created a connectivity that just didn't exist before. People are very engaged with everything because the feeds are giving them content all the time. So most people are aware, like Coney, it's a guy from LA, but you know about him here very quickly, And it just seems people, because of the Great Recession, are very restless. They're very activists. They want to participate. They want to be part of something. And the best way to do that is to, do it with your fun. You don't need to kill yourself anymore. You don't have to walk on the street and protest. You can do it. It helps to do that too, but I think you can do it with your thumb. So when I describe a movement, this is how I define a movement. Basically, an organized community of passionate advocates who rally around an idea on the rise in culture to bring about change. That's the thought. And if you think about the things that change the world, there really are two main things that change the world. One is legislation, like law. If a government comes in, like in America, they came in 2 years ago and they made a law over financial banks that changed the way banks operate. That's a big change for organizations. Governments can change the way car companies operate by putting a tax on engines or forcing, new types of technology. The other way is that people start to feel a certain way and the world changes. And if you're an organization, you can build a business on the back of both of those changes. Those huge shifts are what successful organizations are built on, because they create ideas and services and products on the back of those changes. Is this boring or is this okay?
No.
Okay. I don't want to do this too fast or boring, so it will be good. Okay. So, in the case of a brand movement, the trick is to find an idea out there in society that is relevant to people, what is relevant to their lives, to their interests, and crystallize that for your audience, for your customers. I'll just talk about that in a minute. So yeah, so if you look here for a second, an idea on the rise. So what does that mean? It means, what is an idea that's happening, that's starting to come up in society? What's happening in Spain? In Spain there's a financial crisis, so maybe there's not a lot of money for production companies. A lot of young people probably are restless, are wondering what they're going to do. So it needs, that's a fact. So what is happening in this group that could potentially create a really big change or community? It could be, for example, the rise of Spanish ideas that are successful outside of Spain. You know, for many years, America has come up with ideas and exported ideas around the world. Before America, Spain did that. Back in the, I was at the museum the other day, so I've seen it. You know, Spain was in South America, Spain was in everywhere. So I think maybe going back to the legacy, the idea that a great idea created in Swing Swing can help build a Japanese company all over the world. It doesn't have to be in New York or in London or in those parts of the world. Because as we know, the world is totally changing now, right? The old trade routes, the shipping routes, you know, the ships that went from the west coast of Spain to America, those old trade routes are now ripped up, you know, they don't exist. Now it's all social media. So an idea in Madrid from this office could impact people in China, could impact people in India, and everywhere. So I go off on a tangent sometimes. So what does this mean for brands? Well, in a time of activism, you know, should brands say, oh my goodness, you know, let's just put our, like an ostrich, you know, put our head in the sand and, you know, these things are going on and wait, you know, these Susan G. Komen and Bank of America, should we not do anything? And in my point of view, I think it's a mistake because I think you become irrelevant as a brand. And the only way to really be relevant is to create your own movement or align with the movement that exists out there and to be engaged in that movement. So this, I think, is a big idea. The idea that a brand can identify, spark, lead, and sponsor a mass movement. I think it's a big idea. I think in the past, only very rich men and women and charismatic leaders could do that. But now, you know, a brand could do that. Any brand could do that. A diaper, anything could create a movement or align with the movement. So I think that's much more interesting than, and it could do that to make the world a better place and to sell more stuff, but without creating really horrible ads. That's my opinion. With an idea that's obviously has the power to be shared with people. I talked about this, that, you know, playing it safe will make you invisible in today's world. Because the reality is, you know, you have your Facebook and you have your timeline, and unless there's content up on that timeline, you don't exist. You know? It's like you live in a little box. So brands, you know, need to be able to continually have content that they can put out there, that others can spread. And if you think about it, every one of us have a Facebook page, and we're connected to 100, 200, 500, 1,000 people. So every time you put a piece of content up, it immediately connects to 500, 10,000, 1 million. You know, it goes very quickly all over the world. So what type of stuff is going to be passed on? What's important? Well, you pass on stuff that you think is relevant. Okay, some stuff is cool. This is cool. I like to show my friends that I'm cool. I can send it. But beyond that, you start to send things that you care about, things that are important to you, whatever they are. I like to cook. I like to travel. I like to raise children. I like to run an agency and raise children. You know, whatever your passion is, you know.
But
So.
do you think there's something, I mean, I believe in this. I think brands can embrace a cause and common good. But it's not only about playing not risk or being brave, but also about being truthful to your brand.
Yes.
I mean, there must be what you see society, and you have to identify something that relates to your brand, because if it doesn't, it will feel fake.
Absolutely, yeah. But I think you can, I think you need to, it needs to be relevant.
As well.
As well.
But
yeah.
do you think that
And
it
authentic.
has to be grounded on something
Yeah.
with your brand?
But I've seen some movements that you can actually stretch
A lot.
a lot. Yeah,
Yeah?
I think so.
And it worked?
Yeah, in the book, I looked at 50 different examples of companies and brands. And some of the most interesting ones are not so, they're authentic, but they're not, you don't immediately think, oh, okay, that brand. But the brand made a good connection with that. Some of them you think quite the opposite, like, how could that ever be true? But for example, Dove movement, it's by Unilever Corporation, but it feels like it's against that. It feels like it's about health and beauty and individualism and against the traditional or the cosmetic corporation. So that's a movement which now feels obviously great. But you can see that when it was created, someone may have said, "Oh, can Dove really say that?"
Right.
I mean, it's a chemicals in a bar, and there are other examples.
But somehow it's talking. I mean, it's true. If you analyze it and you think it belongs to Unilever, then you can see, well, it's fake. But at the same time, it's like they're talking about something related to their product.
True. Yeah.
So there's kind of a match. It's true that it's the timing, how you do things, right? That can lead to people believing in what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. Yeah. I think you can somehow, it's, how do you connect it? How do you talk about something other than your product?
Right.
Anything and everything but your product in a way that's most relevant to you, that should have some connection and authenticity. The more authentic, the better. Although some movements, are just silly. They don't really have any.
It's just fun.
It's fun. They don't, and you can get into, the definition of a movement, and is this a movement? Is this not a movement? I think some examples of very successful campaigns are movements, but they're just silly. They're not noble causes.
Right.
I think the issue with the word movement is sometimes you think that everything you do should be, higher, holier than thou. It should be profound, but sometimes it can be something just silly. Like I said, diesel for me is a movement. It's not really doing, it's authentic in the sense that it's trying to talk to young kids. There are probably better examples than these in that book. It's just silly stuff. Sometimes, I think when you're building movements, and we've done some examples, we worked on a brand called Jim Beam. You know Jim Beam?
Yes.
It's an iconic American whiskey, bourbon. For many years it was, advertised as a bourbon, but we wanted to create a movement and make it really relevant. So we created a movement for bold choice, bold living, bold thinking. Because we said in America now, it really needs bold thinking. This is a time when the Great Recession needs really bold ideas, and we traced the legacy back to the fact that many of the founders of Beam were bold, had made bold decisions. so we could connect it to the brand legacy. But the movement is really about inspiring people to be bold. And that's been hugely successful. In 6 months, we had 1 million people on Facebook. Just in 6 months, from 0 to people sharing stories about goals, and all the content that's been created is around that culture. Some people who have made bold decisions, and some people that decided not to be bold, and showcasing all of them, you know. It's really a culture of that. So, yeah. So, yeah, I think if you look at a lot of movements, social movements, if you study social movements, which I've done, you see that there are usually a few things that really create social movement. First is this idea that's on the rise. Someone has captured that idea, someone has crystallized that idea into a thought in order to tell many people. They have a flag, they have a poster, they can articulate it. But in order for that idea to get to a broader audience, there has to be a provocation. There has to be, you have to start the movement, but then you need to do something provocative in order for that to spread. So a good example is in America in the 1960s and 70s, if a woman would have not taken her bra off and burned it, the women's movement would never have received the type of impact we did. That moment was very provocative. You can actually trace many movements where, I'm trying to think of one that would be relevant. Recently in New York, Germany, on Wall Street, there was a standoff between a small group of people, and that, the police were very aggressive, and that provocation spread all over the internet, and it grew Occupy Wall Street by a factor like 500 in 2 days. So these are examples where, as if you're building a brand, if you want it to grow, you have to think about how social movements have grown. So be provocative, and usually it's with a group of people who already are behind the idea. They're already fans or fanatics of the idea. So their participation they're already there. You don't have to convince them. Their role is really to spread it to the mass audience. You want to rally people around, so you want to create places where people can come to hang out. They can be virtual and they can be physical. Like Apple has a store. It's not really a store, it's like a clubhouse where people come in and just hang out with other people that look like them. Because you can buy everything online, you don't need to go to the store. Give people things to do. The thing about movements versus advertising is very passive. Movements want you to actually do something. So if you think about a brief for an ad, it's what do we want people to think. A brief for a movement is what do we want people to do. We want people to, do this. Get off your butt and go do this. Get up and do something. So we want to activate, take action, do something. Is the difference between the two. And we want to, as a brand, we want to provide support to sustain the movement. And that could be in the form of, you can give money, which I think is quite boring, but I think it's more interesting to create tools to spread the movement, or you can create content, or you can create actions, events, people can participate. So as a brand, you think of ways that you can help fuel that movement over time. And another thing about movements versus advertising is, advertising, when you advertise, you spend money, and it's a sustainable idea. Once you launch it out there, it continues on its own, like a spinning top, you know, and you can actually launch multiple movements. So it's much more cost effective for clients. And then once in a while, we create a little bit of content that gets people excited again, and it goes further. So we've done a few examples at StrawberryFrog. I talked about Jim Beam, who worked on the biggest company in India. It's called Mahindra. They make everything. They do cars and aerospace and travel and baby clothes and you name it. And they have, I think, 1 million employees in India. And I think they're active in Spain too. And I think the world will hear about this company a lot in the next few years. It's growing. When I started working with them, they were, I think, perhaps $4 billion in market cap. And today I think they're 14 billion, 3 years later. And they're just growing and growing. It's a huge organization. We created a movement for them. And the movement for them was really about mobilizing a generation of people to think outside the box, to rise up and to not accept limitations, and use ingenuity to change the world. That's really what it was about. It was very important for their company because Indians are very traditional. They don't have a history of brand building. They don't have a history of globalization. They are very domestic and industrial. They make stuff, right? They get wood, they get metal, they get plastic from all over the world, and they make stuff, and then they put, you know, I don't know, brands on it and sell it to Americans. The brands are owned by Americans or Spanish. But they don't know how to move around. So they really need to think outside the box. And this company, Mahindra, used to be in the business of railways and steel and all the old world businesses. You know, now they're into technology, into Google, into, you know, mobile applications, and they need to really, they want to be the biggest, best, coolest company on the planet. So they're trying to not only inspire their own people, but a whole generation of people to think in a new way. So their whole movement is about that. We worked on the smart car case, and we just did this new Emirates work, which you may have seen in Spain. Yeah. And the whole idea behind Emirates movement is to make the world smaller, because the world is too wide, and with the wide world, it's too many misunderstandings. So the mission for this brand is to connect all of us around the world in a much deeper way. So I think I've got a couple of examples of stuff to show you. Maybe I don't want to show you too much stuff.
No, go ahead.
So this you may have seen. This is one piece of wood. Volume over here.
Oh, that's the beginning of the speakers.
Can we go with? It was nice. I went to the game at Real Madrid and they played that.
Really?
Yeah, in the beginning.
Oh, yeah. And how do advertisers take your ideas?
I think
The
they.
advertisers that when you go first to see an advertisement,
I think they
react?
very positively, because I think all of the advertisers are trying to figure out what does this all mean, and they don't know how to connect all the dots. So if you think about the structure of a movement, you can see how different tools can actually come together for an event. You can see what the social media's role is. You can see what the advertising role is. You can see what events or PR goals. So it all actually, through the idea of movement, the whole organization can have a red thread. And I think in that way they find it very positive.
And do you have any kind of process to find the idea or to look at the movement?
Yes.
How do you?
You first, I think you need to, as Judith said,
This is a question of one.
yeah. I think Judith had, to your point, you have to be very, you have to be authentic. So you need to first understand what your brand is about. You really understand what's your brand purpose, what's the brand benefit, what's the brand essence. So you need to understand that. And then I think you need to put that aside for a minute. You need to go out into the world and figure out what is an idea there that could connect to that brand purpose.
But you did research?
Yes. Through anthropological research or ethnographic research or semiotics or all those new types of researches. But I always find the best research is just to talk to people. You know, if you go out and talk to people, you very quickly can start to form a point of view. And if you are a curious person, you can, I think, have a hypothesis of what it could be. And then you can use research as a way of honing that.
Do you have people, do you have role different from advertising people at your agency? I mean, you have anthropologists, you have...
We have people who think, I think, differently, but they are trained as strategic people, as creative people. It's not easy. I mean, you have people that come into an agency from another agency and they want to come in, they want to make an ad. You know, I want to do a TV commercial. So it's a way of working that is, let's say, ideally the way we like to work. But there's, you know, I think it's a way of working versus having a specific training, and a way of thinking versus having gone to, let's say, anthropologist education. I mean, today, if you want to work with a brand, and you say, okay, I'm going to understand the brand, then you can find companies out there, small companies that do anthropological research. There's a guy named Grant McCracken who's a really cool guy. He's a researcher. You can hire Grant to come in and he can do research in Spain or in wherever, and he can find some really great content that you can show your clients and say, look at that, wow, that's really cool. And so there are experts that you can bring in to do that. You don't need to have people full time. And then they can train people to think in a certain way. You know?
You gotta go back.
So. She's a famous designer from Dubai, and then that's a Brazilian model, now in Sao Paulo. A German photographer, now in China. So this idea of this new world is taking shape. It's a brave new world. It's a world where globalistas are taking over. You know, they're connected. They're interacting with each other. They are comfortable with different cultures, and they are they like the new heroes. You know, they're all sorts of people. people. They're entrepreneurs, they're women business leaders. It's quite, I mean, a big idea from an airline from the Middle East, I think. It doesn't show any airplanes, you know, it's an idea rather than here's the product and our seats are bigger. And of course, in addition to this execution, there's a whole bunch of other stuff. There's a Facebook page that's growing every day. There's a cool iPad app, which will come out soon, which is going to be very, I can't explain it.
Very secret.
It's cool. You'll be able to, yeah, you'll be able to do some cool stuff on that, and other stuff. And what's interesting here is, actually, I'll show you the next example. So the next example is, this is not the, this is the Mahindra record.
Over the dusty roads in the city sky. Look higher. Past limits, past expectations.
This is
That's where we find
a rhythmatic video that we created for when we first presented the idea to the board and
see its ideas, products, and people. Its communities and continents. Reaching it requires a simple act that will change everything. Rise is a young nation emerging from an aging world.
So Rise is about India, rising in the
Is a
world.
belief in the future, an opportunity, possibility, and hope.
India in space.
Rise is about my family, my community. Rise is a company that is relentlessly challenging. Rise pushes us forward. Rise is a bank you can trust, a better retail experience, and profits that have the power to fuel change. Rise is a young girl being lifted out of poverty, and a rural farmer saving for a better future. Rise is a more durable tractor cultivating fields and ambitions. Rise is an SUV that is both powerful and green, an MUV with an ingenious turbocharged diesel engine, and new kinds of vehicles not yet imagined. Rise drives innovation, inspires creativity, empowers change. Rise is just one simple word with the power to lift you. A company, a nation, and the world. Rise is a global rallying cry. There are those who accept things as they are, and those who rise to change.
So what's interesting in this case is you have a company with 1 million employees in India who speak many different languages, different ages, and they have 18 different corporations underneath this brand. So they have like a Fiat, they have I don't know, Cortes Inglés, you know, all these different types of industries underneath that one idea. So you have to have an idea that marries all of those together, but also talks to Indians as the main consumer because the company is biggest in India, but it's globalizing. So the idea has to be relevant to people, young people in America, in Spain, in Sweden. So the message has to be relevant. So the research in this case we did for Rise, we talked to young people in about 12 countries, and it was very relevant. The idea, a little bit different, but relevant. Young people were, yes, you know, we want to rise because we don't want to be left down. In India, they have very nationalistic, very positive, optimistic view of the world because India is rising. And connecting those with an idea was what allowed us to build a master brand strategy that now will go global. And from that has come a number of initiatives. The first of which is a national 12-month-long event called Spark the Rise, where we're going across India to look for the most ingenious ideas. And we had, I don't know, like 200,000 people enter ideas that are incredible, just wonderful. But just the idea of stimulating a culture of ingenuity, I think, is amazing. To be, this is a company that used to make steel, and now they're known as being the youth and rising and ingenuity. Just that idea is quite fantastic. They have a social vision, which is to mobilize people to make the world better, and they need to do that in India because they have a lot of social issues in India. So that's one example. And the last example I'll show you is for the smart car, and it's just a silly example, but it's based on a truth that's a great insight. And basically, the insight is in America, the smart car is not as popular as in Europe, because Americans like big cars, and smart car is not very popular. Sales have gone down every year. Americans think smart car is not very safe, not a very good car. It's not cool. Like here, it's more of a cool car, maybe. And they've been marketing the car as a fuel-efficient car, good on fuel, which doesn't help make the car more interesting or relevant. So we created a movement against big mass overconsumption. So when the recession hit in America, there was a backlash against massive consumption. What I mean is, in America, there are a lot of people that have 4-car garages. They have toasters with 10 holes. They have all these things that are just stupid. Like they buy cars that are huge, but they have so many things that are excess. Just the concept of excess. And so there was a movement against excess. So we wanted to own that. So this is a good example of looking out into society and seeing something that hundreds of thousands of people were saying, that's really stupid. And we wanted to own that for the smart car and just say this brand aligns with that movement. And by doing that, we were able to increase sales by 172% in the first month. The top of the funnel grew because we had all these people that were not considering a smart car saying, yeah, we agree. Excess is really bad. So this is I don't know if this is the case or this is
Why do so many smart people do dumb things? We buy stuff we don't need left and right. That's dumb. We buy things without the least concern for the planet. But that makes them dumber. We buy stuff from the Sky Store catalog. Dumbest move ever. Dumb is venti when tall is plenty. Dumb requires multiple remotes. Dumb is 2 for 1 when all you are is 1. Dumb is eating anything bigger than your head. Dumb thinks 12 mpgs, A-okay. When it comes to consuming things, America's got a fever of 100 and dumb. And there's only one prescription, to get smart about our stuff. By having just the right stuff. Not all of it. By buying what we need and borrowing what we can. So long, battery-operated paper towel dispenser, we don't need you anymore. Come to think of it, we never did. Let's put an end to mindless consumption. Let's take the junk out of our collective trunk. That's the whole idea of being smart. We're against dumb. Come join us. Smart.
It's better case there, but you get the idea of what that's about. Dumb mass overconsumption. So I have a couple more slides, and then these are examples of movements that we haven't done, which you may be familiar with. Tom's shoes. Do you know Tom's shoes? Very simple idea. You buy a pair of shoes. He gives a pair of shoes to poor children in needy countries. And that's just exploded as an organization within 2 or 3 years. It's amazing, that thought. Live strong, you know, and then IBM, it's interesting, I was listening to the head of GE, you know GE? GE is a General Electric. He was talking, and about their marketing campaign, which is called, I don't know, do you see ads in Spain about General Electric at all?
No.
Not really?
No, not really.
It's not a big thing here.
It's, the advertising is, maybe there's a company like that in Spain, but they talk about their business and how
We have
many,
many like that.
how innovative they are and how, you know, great they are and, you know, their ingenuity and all that. Whereas IBM, they don't talk about that. They just talk about the movement to create a smarter planet. And it's amazing how those old companies feel like they're old. And that IBM, it feels like a brand that is on a mission that people are joining and want to be part of it. And I think it's a great case for a movement to make the world a better place. In this case, a smarter place, and there's a direct connection to, you know, what IBM can do. It's a great example. I looked at that in the book as well, all of those. So why the future belongs to movements, a deeper way of connecting to people. If you think about it, movements, it's not about an ad anymore, it's about an idea that can really connect to you, what you care about. In the case of Rise, you know, it's about families helping their kids rise. I mean, if I had more time, I could explain the initiatives that that program is doing. Takes advantage of social media, and it gives the brand a sense of purpose beyond just selling stuff, which, you know, people want more these days. If you read that. Is it appropriate for businesses to get involved? Yes, I think so. Because the wall between business and social is breaking down. We talked about several examples today where social and business are interacting. Bank of America, CG Coleman. I work on the global Pampers digital mobile social media work, and there we've also had those types of things happen. And Howard Schultz from Starbucks said the value of your company is driven by your values. And I think that's true. You know, you have to have values today that connect with other people's values and purpose. And the movement is just one more step beyond purpose. And I think mobilizing people to bring about positive change in society is what businesses can and should do. And that's what movements are all about. In the case of Rise, we're driving positive change. That's what that corporation is dedicated towards. And I don't mean just sending money to charities. I'm talking about actually going into communities, helping local communities, helping primarily in education. We've got a huge program to help educate young girls, which is investing in both the United States and in India. They run 100 schools across India to teach young girls, which is unprecedented for a corporation to do something like that. So, you know, any caveats? We talked a little bit about that. We need to be authentic and honest, to be open. Don't pick a movement idea that doesn't fit with your brand. And don't try to control the movement too much. Your role is to support and facilitate. It has to be able to kind of grow and take on a natural feeling. That's it. So, thank you very much. Any questions?
I see all of these movements, we get to know them when they're all ready to be. So I really want to know what's the spark behind them? Because, like you spoke about them, but I don't know, where do you start? What's the first step to get these things going?
Well, I think the first step is when you go into a room and you meet a client and you say, we're not going to do advertising, we're going to create a movement. And they look at you like, what? Like, what are you talking about? What's a movement and why do you don't want an ad? And you say, well, advertising is not what we want to do because it's just, we're not going to achieve your objectives. And we need to understand, what people care about. And then you spend probably 2 weeks in a dialogue back and forth about everything we just talked about. Why we need to think about a movement and not just an ad, and why we shouldn't just take the product and talk about how good the product is, and all those things. And then sometimes the client will say, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then we'll do some research. But usually I have a hypothesis. So for example, with the smart car, for example, you could feel it in America. Everybody just thought they hated Wall Street. They hated expensive big cars. They hated everything that felt like that culture, that excess, So it's an easy one to research because we came back and we showed videos. The clients were like, "Oh my God, this is really a nerve." You touch this nerve, it's just going to grow. In the case of Emirates, I traveled to Brazil, Nigeria, China, many countries, and I met these people, like young, cool, up-and-coming business people. Like in Nigeria, there was this really cool guy who goes through Dubai to China to buy stuff. Goes back to Africa and he sells it in Africa, and he's making a corporation. Like this guy is young, smart, global. I met people like that all over the world. And it's a whole new culture of people. They have no borders. They're multicultural. They're interested in what's going on all over the world. They speak many languages. There's no borders. And I thought, this is the brave new world. This is the world, what's his name? Pedro Aya, his book, Global Soul?
Which one?
Global Soul. It's a book about 10 years old. It's a Brazilian who wrote a book about, it's called Global Soul, and it's about how he's, I think, half Brazilian, half British, and he doesn't feel like he has any roots, and he just is a tumbleweed that travels around the world. But that, I think, is becoming the mass culture now. I think wherever you are in the world, you connect. You want to be part of a world that's bigger. So that was the hypothesis behind the thinking when we started working with Emirates. We thought that's a really big, ideal movement that we wanted to be behind. And it was relevant for them because they have many, many people from different cultures inside the company. It's very multicultural. It's going to become the biggest airline in the world in 2 years. It's amazing if they reach. So that's how you have to start with that. It's like being a creative person.
And what was your next step after deciding you were gonna act there, and you had your hypothesis, and you have already sold the idea to the clients, or what? When does the action start?
Okay. Well, once the idea has been into the company, the next thing you need to do is you need to get everybody inside the organization into the movement. They have to be the first ones, because the movement starts on the inside. So in the case of Mahindra, we spent 18 months doing orientation with all the employees, primarily the senior management and the second level management, not all the people, but those two. 18 months of, same with Emirates. We started working on this 2 years ago. We spent a year and a half internally. So I think that's the most important work, is to get the internal group. And it's difficult sometimes because often with marketers, they're very, they're not passionate about their brands. And the movement gives them a reason to become more passionate. So it's not just selling more, I don't know, Jello or I don't know what's popular here, peanut butter, whatever. It's a higher idea, you know, that they can get behind. And you can, I think you can find a movement for anything. You know, I was challenged once. I was in a meeting for with Procter & Gamble, and they said, "Can you do a movement for anything?" I said, "Yeah, you can do a movement for anything." I think so. I mean, I believe you can if you're creative enough. And we were talking about they had a new, you know, wipe. A wipe is for babies, a new wipe. Yeah. So they said, "Well, we have this new wipe, and it's incredibly good, very." Which it was, you know, how could you create a movement for this? And I said, well, you know, there's a huge culture of what I call mobile moms. They're women with the bugaboos, and they have a machete on the side. It's a bottle and a bag, and they're mobile, and they're out, and they don't want to sit at home. And it would be really cool if this wipe could align with that movement. And part of the strategy of this wipe was it provides you with, so the traditional ad would be a clean that's like a bath. So do you think of a traditional ad, TV ad? It's like, here's the new wipe, better than the old wipe. And it's like a bath, which is a TV commercial. But if you think of it in a movement context, it's like, you're a mom, go out and live in the world. Here's lots of examples or ideas of what you can do. Here's other people that are doing it. Here's a place where you can change your baby all over Madrid. Here's cool places that your kids can go. Here's the changing tables. Here's 5 agendas to do when you don't know what to do. And by the way, brought to you by this wipe, which is much better the further you are away from the bath. You know? So it makes the product much more relevant. But you're creating content that's so interesting to moms that are out and about. So it's just a different way of thinking. And it probably costs a lot less than a traditional TV commercial. It just talks about the wipe. So I think there's any product or brand you have, you can think about a use that could become a movement.
So it seems that the key point is to choose properly what's your movement. Because, for example, a movement like rice, there are very few brands that can do that because of the bigness of it. Like you want to really implement it and bring it to life. You need lots of money and you need lots of preparation, and not so many brands can embrace that movement. And as well, like I see Diesel, and I love it. Every time they bring out something, I really like it. But at the same time, they are shifting all the time. Like, I'm with the stupid now, I'm with whatever. You know, and it's like, okay, what are you about as a brand?
Yeah.
And I think there's also something very important, which is the length or the life of your movement. Like, it seems that smart is something that is going to live for a long life. And I don't think you can choose a movement that it has a short life, because then you have to shift to something new that Diesel is doing, and it's like, okay, what's your brand? You know? In a way.
It's interesting, you know, there was one of the movements that I loved when I lived in Europe was the Ukrainian movement. I don't know if you remember in Ukraine, when Ukraine broke away from Russia, and they wanted to be, you know, and it started as an anti-corruption movement. If you remember it.
Yeah, there was a poisoning case.
Poisoning, that came at the end, but I think it was like, in the beginning it was anti-corruption, and then it became pro-democracy, and then it went pro-Western. In the course of, I think, a year and a half, you saw this movement kind of change. And I think in a way that's a little bit the nature of a movement. Movements can evolve and shift, and I think the role of the brand is to be clear about your purpose, but align with a movement as long as that's relevant for you. And I think in this new world, those movements are going to continue to change. You know, because there's so many things that are happening in the world today. The rise of women, when we talked about it before. In America, the #1 entrepreneur are women. And after the Great Recession, women are almost 2 to 1 number of entrepreneurs in America, starting small businesses. It's going to fundamentally change the way the country thinks about everything. Think about it. 10 years ago, there were never as many women. It's like the marathon. 10, 15 years ago in America, I think it was 80% of the runners in the marathon were men. Now, 60% are women. You know, even in the marathon. It's amazing. But because of the Susan G. Komen, they're running for a purpose. So the world is changing every day. It's difficult, I think, to stick to one movement. I think the movements will change. I think you need to have strong values and core purpose and stick to that. And a little bit be like Jack Bauer in 24. You know, be able to shift if need be. I don't know if you can plan it out as much. I think that the day of building a brand in a slow, successive way, today is, because the world is shifting so quickly all the time, how do you maintain relevance for your purpose or your brand? You know, I think it's an interesting. I think we're in the middle of a real transition. Like we're not at the end. It's kind of the middle. You know, where every day there's like a new thing. Like 2 days ago, Facebook bought Instagram for $1 billion, and I was like, holy jeez, I can't believe it. Like, you know, they started this company a year ago. I've been doing this for $1 billion for that. You know, my God. So yeah, it's a good point. This helps me sort of think about brand building, and it helps me figure out all of these changes by thinking through that model. When I sit with a social media person and a client and advertising and events and PR and in-store and social and e-commerce and all of these things, to talk about it from a movement perspective, it helps everybody kind of get okay, I get it. Because today it's so easy, especially on big brands, for everybody to be in different buckets. Mm-hmm. So I think in the movement, it really does help bring everybody together. Oh, okay, well, that's the movement. And PR people like it because it's got content that's relevant to what's happening in the world, context. The social media people like it because it gives them many ideas for social media. Mm-hmm. The advertising people are like, well, you know, you can do a cool ad, you know, but okay.
Yeah, we're always behind.
They're the cynical people, and quite cynical. Yeah. Any other questions?
Do you think that this kind of movements is too much for companies? That it's too much money, too much people, too much ideas, and don't you think companies, brands, don't want to involve in this kind of movements?
I think they do because I think for them it's cheaper. You know, I think I don't know about Spain, but in America, what happened in the last 2 years was the marketing director would go into the board and he'd say, we're now doing social media. We cut 80% of our budget, but we're doing all these things in Facebook. And everyone thought, oh, this is fantastic. You know, we have the same amount of awareness with no media money. So I think it does help companies to be visibly active by being doing more with less. I think it's more opportunities for agencies to be creating more creative content, not just one execution. I mean, there's so many things today you can do. You can come up with so many different type of ideas that are relevant based on that don't cost much. You know, an example. Sorry, you were going to say something? No.
Que si ibas a decir algo.
So, if you have a big brand in Spain, I think it would be good to go to them and say, you know, you spend 100 million euro on TV advertising. Why don't you give us 2 million and let us focus on a target like mothers or youth or old people, and let's create a movement for them to see if we can build a community of passionate people. Let's do a little bit of an experiment. And if it's successful, then maybe they'll give you 20 million or 200 million, and then they'll give you more. I mean, because I think it is more, it's cheaper and it's sustainable. So it should be a good solution. And you can measure the results. So you can show, you know, evidence that it works. Which is more difficult with advertising because it's, I mean, you can do middle ground, but it's not as easy. So I think companies are looking for that type of solution. It's better, it's smarter, it's more relevant, it's building a sustainable marketing program, and it's cheaper. And agencies get to be more creative. I think it's really cool. So I think it's the future.
My only doubt is that how can you stand out in the middle of the crowd? I mean, you said that there's a lot of movements around. Everybody's trying to do different things.
Yeah.
So how can you really be relevant over the rest? I mean, maybe at the end of the day, you need to use some massive communication.
Sure. Yeah.
To get that awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. I think though what happens is it shifts. So the traditional agency, the default is television is the first
Just TV, yeah.
choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying you should get rid of TV. I'm saying that it shifts down. So if you think about it from a priority list, it's first find an idea that's in the rising culture, then build a community, tools, and activate people already in that space. Then you can create content, populating, and bringing that idea to life. Think of it like a country, a flag, a song, some stories, and heroes,
Yeah.
whatever, like a church, you know, the saints and all the images you need. And then you do mass communication to amplify to a wider audience. But
So
you've
do
already
need
created
money.
the core.
You do,
Huh?
you do need money to
Sure.
be relevant.
You do need money, but you don't need to just do an ad running on TV every day all the
to open
time.
your mind to all the
Yeah,
today's reality, which is social.
yeah, which is social. Just I think it deprioritizes
Yeah.
television further down, and maybe not like every day, running every day. Maybe it's once a week on a Sunday, or maybe it's what's another way of thinking is platforming, which is not advertising every day, and only advertising at the moment when everybody in Spain is watching. You know, finding those moments that are
The
really
one
going to
shot.
create impact.
Yeah.
You know, and not have to continually, because who watches TV anymore? I don't know. Do people watch TV here? Sometimes. Moms?
Never.
I mean, in America, there used to be all these novellas, you know, like TV novellas.
Yeah. Telenovelas.
Telenovelas.
Soap operas.
Yeah. They're all gone.
Yeah. Well, here they are huge things still.
They're used to it.
Relatively hard.
Because Spain is a very old country.
You're very
We
passionate.
and we have a lot of old population.
Right.
So that's why TV.
Not only old, I don't think not only old
It's
people.
it's a big media in Spain still, and it has a huge influence right now. I mean, this will change in a short time, but right now,
Yeah.
we have it.
Yeah, but the consumers are quite fragmented, so if you want to reach the old guys, you have to go through traditional media, but if you want to reach young people, of course, you have to use social media.
It's funny, I went to India about 4 years ago, maybe, something like that, and it was exactly the same. India is the only country in the world where they're launching new TV stations and new magazines every day. Like, it just continues to grow. And they were like, social media, never in India, no way. Within a year, boom! Everybody in India is on Facebook, everybody's on Twitter, all the young people, they don't want to watch TV anymore. Within a year. Within 1 year. Unbelievable. I mean, they're still making new magazines and new television stations, but it's amazing how that's changed. And it will define a new culture of content. Like now, I mean, for me, I have television in my home with, I don't know, 800 channels. There's never anything on TV. And the best TV is on my iPad. There's a really good show called Lilyhammer. Do you have Netflix here?
No.
Oh, this show is it's free on iPad, not even on TV.
What's it called?
It's called Lilyhammer. You know The Sopranos?
Yeah.
You know Little Steven from Bruce Springsteen? So he plays a guy like in The Sopranos, and he gets put in the witness protection program, but he doesn't want to go to like Arizona. He only wants to go to, and he gets to choose where he can go. The only place he knows is Lillehammer in Norway, because he watched the Olympics. So he goes to Lillehammer, and he's the only one who speaks in, like, he's a New York guy in Lillehammer, and it's so funny. It's great. But it's free, and it's not even on TV. You can't watch it on television. You can only watch it on iPad. So I think that everything is changing so quickly, and I think this thinking maybe helps to give some clarity into how you can figure it all out, because it's very complicated.
Yeah, I really like one sentence you said before, which is we have to find what people really care about and focus on that. So I think that's the key. You know, focus on the consumer and what they really care about and what they stand for, and
Just that easy.
go for it. Go for it. It's not easy.
No,
It
it's not
isn't.
easy, because if you think that advertising has been looking for that for
Yeah, but now we are in a new era, so yeah.
But it makes you think in so many new ways, though. I think it's not only caring about, it doesn't have to be big movement ideas. It could be small movement ideas. You know, like when we worked with Pampers, they never advertised to women before they gave birth. Never. Because they only advertise to customers. So a woman who's pregnant is not a customer. So they don't advertise to those customers. So we had an idea, which was a movement, which was to capture at conception. And so we created a whole strategy where we created content for that strategy, and we ended up developing a whole series of initiatives. One called Hello Baby, which is an iPad app, which is a very cool pregnancy calendar. You know pregnancy calendar?
Yeah.
Actually, it's better on an iPad, but let's see if I can. So this is what we created. It's called Hello Baby. And it's much better on an iPad. But you go in there and you put your gestation date, the day you know you conceive, and it immediately tells you when you're going to deliver, And you can go through and you can see, yeah, the baby goes, and you can actually, you can go like this, and that kind of thing. And there's also like sound effects. You can hear the heartbeat when it comes, and all this information comes up about the nails every day, like what's going on. The nails are growing, the hair is growing, and so forth.
And only to the
And that, this is real size here. That's real size. And actually, the baby gets older.
But do you have information also about the mother and what is happening to her?
She doesn't want to know.
Doesn't want to know. But what's interesting about this is we had 20,000, we created this app, put it out there, and we've had 20,000, actually more now, but just in the US, 20,000 new moms download this every month. So since we launched this with the launch of the iPad, if you go online, you can see it online on there. 20,000 moms downloading this for free. So think about what that means, right? And now what we're doing for the next generation is we're creating all these apps that are personalized parenting. So there's going to be one for sleep that helps you to monitor your baby's sleep with a sleep monitor.
Stevie.
Huh?
Stevie is an Spanish author writing about.
Oh, is this like a future shock? Yeah.
The Magic Get to Sleep Baby application is coming or not?
The which one?
The Magic Get to Sleep Baby.
There'll be that one.
So you clap and he's asleep.
That would be, I think, a very successful application.
You shouldn't give that to Pampers.
Yeah. But this is creative. I mean, this is not a TV commercial, but it's fun to do these kind of things. You know, and we're inventing new things that populate that strategy. You know, to help. So there's utility, there's information, there's entertainment, there's content, and exchange. The women are giving data. So the new marketing is data-driven marketing. So it's that exchange. You give your data, your usage. So for these new apps, this is a basic app. It's information. But the new apps will be like you'll be able to actually customize the app around your baby, and the app will be able to prompt you with suggestions. And as you use that, the application gets smarter, and data goes into a back-end computer.
It's like an iTunes for moms, kind of?
It's more like a Nike Plus. It's like a Nike Plus.
Okay.
Where it understands your usage occasions and gives you information and suggestions for how you can solve issues with your baby. So if your baby's not sleeping properly, it gives you suggestions for how your baby, and it monitors sleep. And it's all done through your iPhone, so you can put it by your bed and you can hear and watch your baby as they're sleeping, because there's a monitor, but it also registers how the baby is actually doing, and it makes recommendations on how you can help the baby sleep better. And it's taking that data so that it can give you advice as the child grows, which is important because after the first year, the usage of Pampers tends to fall off because mothers feel more confident and they start to buy cheaper brands. So the relationship is deeper.
Builds.
And then, keep it for another year, it's worth a tremendous amount of money. So it solves a lot of issues, marketing issues that 3 or 4 years ago didn't exist. They did ads. Now we're doing.
And wait, have you
I should
ever
sell this to
thought about?
Instagram for $1 billion.
Right. Have you ever
You know
thought
what I
about doing it for yourself? Like, have you ever thought about jumping into
Yes, every day.
Because I think I'm going to too.
Yeah.
Like, how can advertising agencies, we don't just take the power, and we're thinking all the time of ideas for others, and some of them, in the best of cases, just turns to be a great success, and we make a lot of money for our clients. Like, why don't we just jump into the other side and get initiatives to get done and promoted by us, paid by us, so we can also get the benefits.
We should. I think the trick is to connect the creative people with the financial people.
Okay.
To get the
But
clients.
some of these ideas, we don't need so much money.
No.
So much money. It's just about redirecting some of your, you say, people thinking and just resources, assets to assign them to a project and just making it.
Yeah, I think that's. But then to grow it though, you need to have like a.
Probably you need more money, but maybe you can sell it then, just when you have it. I don't know.
I think that's true. I mean, there are things that are happening in America now that are just unbelievable. I mean, it's like a gold rush. What's going on in the U.S. Things that I mean, I could tell you stories. I should write a book about it. Actually, it's amazing. It'll blow your mind about what people are doing. But anyway, it's our industry is changing so much. But it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's fun.
This has been really fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. If you come to New York, please visit. Yeah, it's not as beautiful as
We have a
this.
big house.
Yeah, this is so lovely.
Big garden.
No? We're in Madison, yeah.
There are few agencies right now.
Very few. Yeah. Most are gone.
One, two.